Hello, it is 1DM here to talk about grapple builds in Pathfinder. No, wait, no, not that kind of grapple build. Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I'm going to run through exactly how grappling works, all the mechanical options you have to work with to improve your grapples, and what I think you should do if you want to build a character around grappling your enemies. As a disclaimer, this discussion will be about mechanics and about grapple-focused builds. If you want a character who can grapple enemies well, take any few of the tips I give here. You don't need to be built around it for grappling to be worth doing. And you don't need to min-max, but I'm going to discuss how we can make grappling as good as you can, and that's going to mean a little bit of min-maxing. Before we look at options and character builds, let's first understand how grappling works. Grapple is an athletics skill action available to all characters. It has the attack trait. You must have a free hand to use it, and your opponent can't be more than one size larger than you. To take the action, you make an athletics check and compare it to the target's fortitude DC, which is their fortitude save modifier plus 10. A critical success restrains the enemy, making them flat-footed and immobilized, but more importantly, they can't attack or use any manipulate actions, which includes most spells, until they escape. They can escape by making an unarmed attack, athletics check, or acrobatics check against your athletics DC. This means the enemy loses at least one action escaping, or could lose their entire turn if they fail. If you instead get a regular success when grappling, the enemy is grabbed, making them immobilized and flat-footed, which makes them easier to hit. They also have a 20% chance to lose any manipulate actions they attempt. Failure has no real effects, and critical failure lets your target choose between grabbing you or forcing you to fall prone. So what does all this mean for our character? Because grappling always requires an athletics check, our character will obviously want to have a high proficiency in athletics, and the highest strength modifier we can get. In addition, since grapple has the attack trait, it does incur a multiple attack penalty. So if you fail with a grapple check, it will rarely be effective to attempt again in the same turn. 3 attempts will virtually always be a waste. If you have any other actions to do, those are usually better. There are a couple ways to reduce this penalty, which I'll get to later in the video. Also keep in mind that we're rolling against an enemy's fortitude DC. Many enemies have a higher fortitude DC than their AC, though some have lower. When fighting a boss level enemy, your chances of succeeding often won't be high to begin with. Taking a minus 25% chance of success on your second attempt is a huge penalty. So clearly, grappling doesn't work in a vacuum. The character should be able to do something else on their turns as well. This video won't go into a lot of what that something else should be, but that is important to keep in mind. I will say that other athletic skill actions will work well once you build for grappling. Trip is useful against enemies with lower reflex saves than fortitude saves. Shove is effective for creatures without reach or on ledges. And disarm is okay. Demoralizing is also an effective use of an action if you can invest in intimidation as well, as it lowers the enemy's fortitude save for future grapple attempts. With all that in mind, let's get into how we should actually build this character. Let's go in order of how Paizo recommends you build a character from level 1, starting with the Ancestry. As far as I can tell, there actually aren't any Ancestries that specifically grant bonuses to grappling, so most Ancestries are good choices. However, since we'll be needing our strength modifier, we should avoid all Ancestries with flaws to strength, which are gnomes, halflings, ratfolk, and sprites. It's also a good idea to avoid small ancestries, as they are only able to grapple creatures one size lower than medium creatures. This extends that list to include goblins, kobolds, leshies, and shunies. I will recommend one ancestry, however, and it kind of goes against what I just said. Kobolds. If your GM allows uncommon ancestries and playing a kobold makes sense for your campaign, playing a kobold and taking kobold weapon familiarity as your first level ancestry feat is highly effective for grapplers. This is because access to kobold weapons gives you access to the Fangwire. Fangwires have several useful traits, but the important part is that the Fangwire is the only weapon in the game that has both the agile and grapple traits. This means that you can make a second grapple check on your turn with a -4 penalty instead of a -5. While that's still not great, this can also combine with the Ranger's Flurry class feature to give a much smaller penalty overall. If you take that path, a turn of 2 or even 3 grapple checks starts to sound more reasonable. The downside to this is that kobolds are small, meaning you can only grapple medium creatures. You can perfectly well ignore this option and not play with kobold weapons, choosing to take other actions on your turns. But this is a very strong option for a pure grapple build. The next part of character creation is your background. This one is hard to talk about because there are just so many backgrounds. And since they don't give any exclusive bonuses and you can always take a boost to strength, you can actually take any background you want without missing out on options you can just take later. You could take Farmhand or Lumber Consortium Laborer for Assurance with Athletics, but Assurance just plain sucks. If the GM allows it, you could take the Fogfen Taleteller background or the Touched by Dahak Rare background to gain the Titan Wrestler skill feat, or just take it later. And finally, we come to which class to pick. As I've said, we're going to need a high strength modifier. If we want to max out our strength, putting an 18 into it at level 1, we're going to need to pick a class that can take strength as its key ability score. I'm going to go through each of the classes and discuss what they have to offer. I'm not going to build out a full character and mention feat choices at every level, just talk about what's relevant to grappling. If you want to build a grapple character, you can fill in the other parts of the character for yourself. And let's start with the classes that you shouldn't pick for grappling. First up, the Rogue. Rogues can take strength as their key ability score if they have the Ruffian Racket. But that's all they have going for them here. Rogues are not made to grapple. They do gain more skill feats and skill increases than other classes, but they can't increase to Master or Legendary any sooner. There's only one useful athletic skill feat for grappling, and of course the real kicker is that rogues have no grapple-related feats. Don't build a rogue for grappling. Next up, the Champion. Champions have really nothing to help them grapple or otherwise crowd control enemies, and I find this a little bit odd. Champions have a lot of ways to be buffers and tanks, but they really can't be built to control the battlefield. There is one thing they can do that other martial classes can't, which is take a deity's domain spells, starting from first level. The Might Domain's first level focus spell, Athletic Rush, takes one action and lets you immediately stride, then gain a +2 status bonus to athletics checks for the rest of that turn. This is a great opener, but feels pretty bad if you're already in melee, as that move action won't get used. Alternatively, the Toil Domain's first level focus spell, Practice Makes Perfect, uses your reaction instead of your action, used when you would fail a check. You gain a +2 status bonus to that roll, or +3 if you're master, possibly changing the result. This is very strong because you can choose to use the focus point only when the bonus is needed, unlike with Athletic Rush. However, you can't turn a success into a critical success with this. It's also better if you're already in melee. So technically, champions are the best first level grapplers in the game because they can actually take something at level 1 that gives a significant bonus. And this does scale up a little bit with level because you can get up to 3 focus points, letting you use these bonuses up to 3 times in one encounter. But no other benefits come in to supplement this. Champions just don't have what it takes to grapple. Now we're going to get into classes that have some more content to them. Here comes the Fighter. The single strongest aspect of a fighter is their proficiencies. Fighters gain the earliest weapon proficiency increases of any class in the game, making them unparalleled at, well, fighting. Note that this does not affect athletics checks to grapple, even when using a weapon with the grapple trait, as grapple checks always use your athletics proficiency, but that will partially change. At second level, you can take the Combat Grab feat, allowing you to make a strike, and if it hits, you automatically grab the enemy as well. This doesn't just save an action on attacking and then grabbing. The big strength here is that it allows you to target either AC or Fortitude DC and deal damage while grabbing enemies. However, you will never critically succeed on a grab this way. Also note that this feat has the Press trait. This means it can only be used while you're affected by a multiple attack penalty. This is still a good feat, but that downside is pretty huge. Your first attack can be a grapple check, and you can then try this if it fails, so it has some flexibility. All this to say, this feat is useful. Not perfect, but useful. At 6th level, Advantageous Assault takes advantage of your successful grapples by attacking a grabbed enemy with a bonus to damage and a small amount of damage even on a miss. This also has Press. Also at 6th level, you can take Dazing Blow, letting you take a press attack against a grabbed creature, which then stuns them if they fail a Fortitude save. It's pretty unlikely that you will hit and the enemy will fail that save, but even on a success, they lose one action, making this quite effective. At level 10, Agile Grace reduces your multiple attack penalty to -3 and -6 with agile weapons. This synergizes very well with Combat Grab, making that second attack with a free grab a little more likely to hit. Other than that, fighters actually don't get anything specific that helps grappling. There are many simple ways to build a fighter, such as taking a bunch of shield feats, dual wielding feats, single hand feats, two-hander feats, whatever. But there aren't many feats for skill action maneuvers. Fighters are going to have a hard time competing with the last 3 classes on this list. Now we come to the Barbarian. Your choice of instinct isn't incredibly important for grappling, although the Draconic instinct fits well thematically if you chose to play a kobold. Barbarian grapplers don't come online very early, but when they do, it's very effective. At 6th level, the Brutal Bully feat allows you to deal your strength modifier and damage to an enemy each time you successfully grapple them. This doesn't make your grapples more successful, and the damage is a bit small, but this can add up. Furious Bully at level 8 is perfect though, giving a +2 circumstance bonus to all athletics checks for attack actions, which includes all grapples. This is huge and absolutely necessary for a Barbarian grapple-focused build. The 8th level Thrash feat is also very useful, letting you deal your strength modifier plus your rage damage plus your weapon specialization damage to a grabbed enemy with a basic fortitude save, which right away will be 11 to 16 damage depending on your instinct. This is great, dealing damage without a multiple attack penalty, but doesn't at all compete with Furious Bully for your 8th level feat. Consider taking Thrash at a higher level instead. At 10th level, Tangle of Battle is pretty alright, letting you attempt to grapple an enemy that you just crit as a reaction, but it will still take the multiple attack penalty. I'm personally not that big of a fan of this feat, as it won't give you opportunities to grapple often, and they won't be your best grapple attempts. But if you're building a dedicated grappler, this is still useful on occasion. At 12th level, Furious Grab is also absolutely perfect for this build. It lets you use one action to attack, and then if it hits, your second attack is a guaranteed success on a grapple. This lets you be a more effective damage dealer without making grapple checks at large penalties. And similarly to the fighter feat I mentioned earlier, it lets you choose whether to target an enemy's AC or their Fortitude DC, which is lower will depend on the enemy. Embrace the Pain, another 12th level feat, is also extremely good, letting you attempt to grapple an enemy that hits you as a reaction. Personally, I would take Furious Grab first, and then Embrace the Pain at 14th level, but I think either way works well. At 16th level, Collateral Thrash improves your Thrash, letting you damage 2 enemies at once while you have one grabbed. Again, pretty alright. In conclusion, Brutal Bully will add some free damage to grapples you're already doing. Furious Bully is a must-have constant bonus. Thrash will give you an effective way of dealing damage without multiple attack penalties. Furious Grab and Embrace the Pain are very strong upper-level feats, giving you even more different ways to grapple. And finally, Collateral Thrash further improves your ability to damage in combat after grappling. This gives you feats to take at every even level from 6 to 16. Clearly, Barbarians have a lot going for them as a grappler. This is a very effective build, able to hold enemies in place, regularly causing them to waste actions while still dealing damage. This is going to be pretty hard to compete with. That being said, let's take a look at the next class for grapple builds. Monks. Monks start to come online a little bit earlier than Barbarians. The 2nd level feat, Crushing Grab, works basically like Barbarian's Brutal Bully, but only deals your strength modifier and damage on a grab instead of a shove or a trip. As I said for Barbarians, this is a small amount of damage, but will happen a lot and doesn't take an action, so it's a very useful feat. At 4th level, the Flurry of Maneuvers feat lets you replace one or both of your strikes from Flurry of Blows with grapples, shoves, or trips. This is pretty solid, letting you make grapple attempts with fewer actions. At 6th level, Whirling Throw is an amazing feat, letting you attempt to throw grabbed enemies with another athletics check versus their Fortitude DC. On a success, the damage will be 3d6 plus your strength, and you could of course deal falling damage in some battlefields. That's equivalent damage to having a greater striking rune on an unarmed attack, so this damage compares well to regular attacks until very high levels. On a melee enemy, this also wastes an enemy's action getting back into melee range, or even 2 actions. All of this is great, but the real kicker is that this attack doesn't use a multiple attack penalty. That's right, you can grapple an enemy, strike them twice with a Flurry of Blows, and then throw them with no penalty at all. The only downside here is that the enemy will no longer be grabbed during your allies' turns. It's a very interesting ability, usable for damage, battlefield control, and action economy at the same time. At 8th level, there are 2 great feats to take. Mixed Maneuver lets you make 2 of Grapple, Shove, and Trip with the normal 2 action cost, but your multiple attack penalty doesn't increase until after both. Against a single target, you could Trip and Grapple. If both succeed, the enemy is both prone and immobilized, meaning they can't take an action to stand up until they first take an action to escape. This forces an enemy to either waste 2 or more actions, or make all attacks at a -2 penalty. This is a pretty sweet use of 2 actions. Instead, you can take Clinging Shadows Initiate, giving you the focus spell Clinging Shadows stance. This stance has some pretty interesting stuff like reach and negative damage, but the important part to me is that you gain an unarmed attack with both Grapple and Agile. And as long as you're in the stance, you have +2 to all athletics checks to grapple and escape DCs. This is an absolute must for a grappler monk. I might even invest in other key spells just to enlarge my focus pool for this stance. Personally, I would take this at level 8 and then Mixed Maneuver at level 10. The other feat at 10th level, Sleeper Hold, lets you replace the regular grapple effects on a creature you've already grabbed with Clumsy on a success or Unconscious on a critical success. This is kind of okay. Clumsy can stack with Flat-Footed, potentially giving a -3 to AC, but since this action has the Incapacitation trait, enemies higher than your level treat your check as 1 degree worse, making it a lot harder to use. Improved Knockback at level 12 is okay, dealing some damage and pushing enemies further on your shove rolls. Shove is more situational than grabbing or tripping, and so is often used less, but if you find yourself shoving a lot, take this feat. Stance Savant at 12th level is also decent, saving you an action to enter Clinging Shadow stance when a combat begins. You could go either way on 12th level feats. The 14th level feats are both very situational. Form Lock lets you counteract a polymorph effect on a grabbed enemy. The Shadow's Web focus spell deals a large amount of negative damage in an area and enfeebles, but it's a 30-foot burst centered on you, and so will just about always hit your allies too. Both interesting, but pretty hard to use. In summary, Crush and Grab adds a bit of free damage to your grapples. Flurry of Maneuvers frees up more actions for other things on your turns. Whirling Throw provides high damage, battlefield control, and wasting enemy actions. Clinging Shadow Stance gives it ongoing bonuses to grapples. Mixed Maneuver gives even more flexibility in controlling enemies. The other feats I mentioned are all pretty much optional for a grappler build. So monks also have a lot going for them. Like barbarians, they have some versatile approaches to how you can act in battle. Monks have a little bit less damage dealing capability once grappling, but they're generally more defensive. Granted, they have fewer hit points and no raging resistance, but better saves and way higher AC than barbarians. Monks gain grapple-relevant level 2 and 4 feats, but don't have much to take after 10, meaning the build will come online sooner and be more effective in tiers 1 and 2 of play. At higher levels, it's hard to judge, and both will be effective in different ways. And last up, we have a class that's actually my personal favorite class to build a grappler. Maybe not the strongest, but my favorite. And it's not what I expected going into this video. It's the Ranger. The first benefit Rangers get is from Flurry, reducing their multiple attack penalty against their hunted prey to -2 and -4 with an agile weapon. This goes great with a Kobold Ancestry, so you can get agile grapple weapons. If you're adjacent to 2 enemies and wielding a Fangwire in each hand, you can hunt enemy number 1, grapple enemy 2 with no penalty, then grapple enemy 1 with a -2 penalty. This is by far the best option we've yet seen for multiple grapples in one turn, even reliably grabbing 2 enemies at once. This is looking pretty promising. Let's look at what later options can do for us. Animal companions are always a safe thing to take at level 1. They can also grapple enemies, though they can't gain quite as high an athletics bonus as you. Pretty much any companion with a +3 starting strength is good. I might recommend the Scorpion companion, whose advanced maneuver is an attack with a guaranteed grab on hit. At 4th level, I'd recommend Companion's Cry, letting you give an additional one of your actions to your companion if you wish. This simply allows for more versatile use of your actions if you used your first action to grapple an enemy and there isn't another one in range. You can then advance the companion to Mature at 6th level and then Savage at 10th level, increasing its strength and athletics proficiencies. At this point, your companion will have +6 to strength and an expert proficiency in athletics, making them almost as good as you at grappling. At 12th level, Double Prey will be very useful. With 2 hunted prey, you can potentially grapple 2 enemies as I described earlier, and have your companion get reduced multiple attack penalties against yet another enemy. At 16th level, you can specialize your companion as a bully, giving it even more strength and athletics, up to a +7 strength and master athletics, as well as increasing its size up to large. Finally, at 20th level, triple threat further increases your number of hunted prey. If you have some way of gaining an additional free arm or prehensile limb, you could even grapple 3 enemies at once. In conclusion, all rangers have going for them here is the flurry ability to reduce multiple attack penalties, and animal companions to help grapple even more enemies. It's not a lot of versatile feats like barbarians and monks have. On the other hand, that flurry bonus is very significant, and this character sounds like a ton of fun and a lot of flavor. Imagine a kobold ranger who can wrestle 2 giants at once, while their 10-foot long pet scorpion takes another 2. If that isn't the most Pathfinder thing I've heard today, I don't know what is. Now, all of this discussion of classes hasn't mentioned the option of multiclassing. Barbarians, monks, and rangers all have some pretty solid options on their own, but what about mixing them together? If you can afford the 2 feats at any point, a very strong option is to take the champion dedication, worshipping a deity with the might domain or the toil domain, and then the first level champion feat deity's domain to gain either the athletic rush spell or practice makes perfect. You can take more focus spells to increase your focus point pool, but they are some of the only ways in the game to gain a status bonus to your athletics check. I'll discuss the others in the bonuses section, but long story short, if you don't have a helpful bard or wizard in the party, one of these 2 spells will make a huge difference. Otherwise, you can also multiclass the other major grappling classes and take whichever feats are most useful for you. Now we'll briefly discuss the general build details that any character can or should take for grappling. You're going to want to take the Titan Wrestler feat as soon as you possibly can. If you're playing a medium Ancestry, this will let you use athletic skill actions on huge creatures, such as giants, as early as level 2, and gargantuan creatures once you reach Legendary in Athletics at level 15. This is a must for a grapple-focused character, as without it, there will be many enemies you just can't grapple at all. For items, there are a few different sources you can pick from for item bonuses, which I'll discuss in the bonuses section. Otherwise, the only item you'll absolutely need is the Belt of Giant Strength as soon as you can afford the 15,000 gold pieces, as it straight up increases your strength stat. Now let's take a minute to talk about bonuses. If you recall from the core rulebook, bonuses and penalties come in 3 types: circumstance, status, and item. If you have multiple bonuses of the same type, only the largest one applies. In other words, stacking several items with athletics bonuses is a waste. We just want to focus here on the bonuses that are the largest, or in some cases the most reliable. Item bonuses to athletics come from a lot of sources actually. The most common is potency runes on weapons. You can put potency runes on hand wraps of mighty blows, increasing your unarmed grapple checks, or on a fang wire if you're using that to grapple. Instead, armbands of athletics give an item bonus to all athletics checks, generally the same as you could get on a potency rune. These are the most reliable, but the largest comes from consumable bestial or applereed mutagens. At all levels, they outclass potency runes by +1. Applereed gives size and speed as well, but are uncommon, so you may not have access in your game. If you do, you could have a party alchemist who can infuse them or stock up in stores. They shouldn't be too expensive at most levels. Circumstance bonuses have fewer sources. The good ones are basically Barbarian's Furious Bully and Monk's Clinging Shadow Stance, both for +2. The highest possible circumstance bonus is actually +4 if an ally aids you and gets a critical success. However, I wouldn't rely on that. While having an ally legendary in a skill that can help you and beat a DC 30 isn't actually that unlikely, having them spend an action and reaction on doing so is a pretty high cost. They could probably do something better. Status bonuses also have very few sources. A level 1 wizard focus spell Physical Boost gives +2 to a single roll. You could have one of the domain spells Athletic Rush or Practice Makes Perfect, one for +2 to athletics on this turn, the other for +2 or 3 on a single check. Alternatively, if you have a bard in the party, the bard cantrip Song of Strength gives +1, but can be cast as soon as level 1. It also progresses. If the bard takes Inspire Heroics at level 8, they can attempt a very hard performance check to increase the bonus to 2 or even 3. This is the most consistent buff you can get, but also the largest potentially. So here we get to a fun little aside. Let's add all those up to see what is the highest possible grapple check you can have in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Obviously, our character will have to be level 20 and legendary in athletics for a plus 28 proficiency bonus. If we start with 18 strength, put a boost into it at each 5-level interval, and equip a belt of giant strength, we have a 24 in strength for a plus 7. Now we can have one each of circumstance, status, and item bonuses. The highest achievable item bonus is plus 4 from a greater bestial mutagen. The highest status bonus is plus 3 from a bard casting Song of Strength cantrip modified by Inspire Heroics metamagic with a critical success on their performance check. And the highest circumstance bonus is plus 4 from a critical aid. This brings our total athletics check to a plus 46 modifier. Let's compare that to a level 16 creature with an extreme fortitude save, the Rune Giant. We need to beat a DC 43. That means a natural 1 is a failure. 2 through 6 is a success for 30% chance, and we have a 65% chance of a critical success, taking away just about all of the Giant's options until it takes an action to escape. And its athletics check against your athletics DC only succeeds in a natural 20. So that Giant is completely out of the fight. If your Kobold Flurry Ranger then grapples a second Giant, the chance of failure is still only 5%. So yes, your Kobold can in fact grapple 2 Giants at once, and it can do so to great effect. If we compare instead to an Ancient Gold Dragon, a level 20 creature with a high fortitude save, we have a 5% chance of failure, 50% chance of success, and 45% chance of critical success. Still incredibly good odds. And finally, let's compare to the 2 highest level creatures in the game. The level 25 Near Demon Lord Tree Razor with a high fortitude save, and the Tarask. To grapple Tree Razor, we need a 52, so our crit fail is at 5%, our failure is at 20%, success is 50%, and critical success is 25%. Against the Tarask, we need a whopping 57 for 5% crit fail, 45% fail, 45% success, and 5% critical success. For the highest fortitude save in the game, I like those odds. But that's unrealistic, you say. Well, yes, you're right. It's achievable, but it's not going to happen all the time. Let's say you don't have access to a greater apple root or bestial mutagen, your bard fails their check, and you don't get an aid. You still have a plus 41 to athletics. You are still going to grapple that dragon. And all of this doesn't even take into account penalties to enemy fortitude saves. There are also certain status effects that reduce an enemy's fortitude save. In large fights, or if you want to grapple multiple enemies at once, this is less likely to be useful, as it's easier to gain a +1 to yourself than put a -1 penalty on all of your enemies. Against one big target, however, penalties are a huge way of making your grapples better. There are 4 conditions that penalize a creature's fortitude save: drained, fatigued, frightened, and sickened. However, note that since these all give status penalties, none of them will stack with each other for fortitude saves. I don't know of any ways to inflict item or circumstance penalties to fortitude saves. There are a ton of different sources that inflict these conditions though, and truly any party can find ways to help with this. Here, I'll just list the most powerful, most efficient, and easiest methods to apply penalties, sorted by what level you can use them at. The easiest and most obvious method is by demoralizing, a single action activity that anyone can attempt with a simple intimidation check versus the enemy's will DC. The earliest and most action-efficient way to apply Drained is with a Bones Oracle casting Soul Siphon for just 1 action. The Fear spell is also available from level 1, inflicting Frightened 2 on a failed save. Heightened to 3rd level, it can target 5 enemies at once, or you can replace it with Agonizing Despair to target 1 creature but also deal damage. Interstellar Void is a 3rd level focus spell for Cosmos Oracles. It has to be sustained each round, but it inflicts fatigued regardless of the enemy's save, making it just about the only guaranteed source I've found. Enervation is a 4th level spell of all traditions except Primal that can inflict Drained in a 30-foot line, making it a powerful area of effect application. The 8th level spell, Polar Ray, can apply Drained 2 on just a successful hit, another very action-efficient condition application that also deals a lot of damage. Lastly, if you're an 18th level Barbarian, Vicious Evisceration lets you drain an enemy on a hit for 2 actions, leaving 1 to still grapple. So with all of this said, how would I build a dedicated min-maxed grappler? As you can probably tell after all of this, It depends on the level of the character and also personal preference. Barbarians, monks, and rangers will all be solid grapplers at all levels. Barbarians deal the best damage and have the most overall options. Monks are tankier and come online a little bit earlier, but don't have a lot left to gain at higher levels. Rangers are far and away the best at grappling multiple enemies at once. So how would I do it? Personally, I like the ranger option. Being able to reliably grapple multiple enemies, in my mind, outclasses any of the bonuses barbarians or monks get. On screen is a feat list for a character I built just for fun. This is a level 20 Kobold Ranger with the giant scorpion companion that I mentioned earlier. I also took Wormling Flight so that I can grapple enemies in the air. The character has multi-class feats into Monk and Champion to take deity domain spells as well as the Clinging Shadow stance. I also put points into Charisma, Intimidation, and Intimidation skill feats to further frighten enemies once I've used my actions on grappling. So there you have it. Everything you could want to know and more about grappling in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Again, if you want to make a character that's good at grappling, you don't need to do all of this. All you need is a decent strength score and athletics proficiency. Grappling is a great action for any character. But if you want to make a character who's dedicated at it, make use of any of the info I gave here to make your character even more efficient. Thank you all so much for watching my first ever video on this channel. I hope to have much more for you to watch soon. If you're interested in this type of content, please feel free to like and subscribe so you can see more in the future. If you're not, please tell me why and what I can improve. But this is 1DM out. Have a great day. So clearly, grappling doesn't work in a vacuum. The character. I'm not going to go through... Yes, I am. They do not gain more skill... Yes, they do. Then gain a +2 status bonus to a... Status bonus to athletics checks. At 16th level, Collateral Thrash. At 16th level, Collateral Thrash does what again? This stance has some pretty interesting stuff, like reach and negative damage, but the important part to me is that you gain an unarmed attack with both Grapple and... Grapple? That's not a word. 45% success and 5% critical success. Critical success.